Hello, friends. You're watching our daily program Samike, and this is WStv. I'm Rajesh Tyagi for WStv. Taliban. Taliban administration in Afghanistan has once again banned all higher education for girls and women. Higher education doesn't mean from Asian standards. Higher education in Afghanistan means anything above sixth class. So Taliban has passed an order and has banned all education above sixth class for girls. After 7 months, Taliban has taken a decision to open the schools and permit the girls to attend classes. And suddenly, an order has been passed. As soon as schools were opened, this order has come, and emissaries of Taliban had entered schools to serve this order. And by this order, Taliban has banned all education for girls in uh, higher standard, higher than sixth standard in entire Afghanistan. So once again, the dark ages of Taliban administration that had existed in its first term in 1996 to 2001, they have returned. The same Taliban has returned. It seems that Taliban is divided in two factions. One faction is in favor of giving certain liberties to women, liberties in education and employment, but broadly, Taliban is against it. So, Taliban has passed this order. This official order has come from Taliban administration, which has imposed a blanket ban on higher education of girls and women above sixth standard. So that means from seventh standard above, girls would not be able to take any education in Afghanistan. This has been confirmed by Taliban spokesperson Imanullah Samagani, who has confirmed that yes, an official order has been passed by Taliban administration, the Taliban government, and this order has to be followed by all schools. Not only the schools which are specifically meant for girls in Afghanistan, they have been closed down, but all the schools that were imparting education to girls along with boys have been closed down. So, the education for girls above sixth standard is totally banned. That stands totally banned in Afghanistan. That Afghanistan administration, their education ministry, spokesman Aziz Ahmad Ryan has refused to comment on this order. He has said that we are not allowed to comment on it. So, education ministry spokesperson is not commenting. Then who would comment? In fact, Taliban administration, after banning this education for girls, it has made a statement to press, to media, where it says that we are, means Taliban is taking a decision, and it has not taken a decision till yet. So it is taking a decision as to how girls should be imparted education and how this education should go for girl students in accordance with Islamic principles and Taliban culture. And we don't know, it is not told by the spokesperson whether this Islamic education formula would apply to girl students below sixth standard or above sixth standard. It seems from the statement that for girls who are attending classes even up to sixth standard, they would be subjected to more strict restrictions, and they would also be pushed to despair. This girls' despair in Afghanistan, this has resulted in international outrage, and the shock policy has attracted attention of uh, women organizations all over the globe. United Nations and organizations like Human Rights Watch, they have intervened, they have expressed their shock on this new policy decision of Taliban government, because Taliban government, after taking power into its hands in August last year, it has promised, it has pledged to international community that this time it would not subject women to those rigorous restrictions as were applied in its first term during 1996 up to 2001. So it was internationally, it was being expected that Taliban administration this time, the second administration, would not put women under the same strict restrictions, under the same rigorous standards as it had put during its first regime. But now during second regime also, it seems to have taken a U-turn, and it is showing that it has no respect and no nothing towards women liberty and women liberation. Rather, it may be more stricter regimen under this second Taliban as compared to the earlier one. In entire Afghanistan, this higher education means education above 7th standard for girls and women, that is strictly banned now. And even for education up to 6th standard, there is no infrastructure in Afghanistan. Many provinces in Afghanistan are not having any infrastructure, any arrangement for girl education even up to 6th standard. So what seems to us is that Taliban is implementing its policy of depriving women from education, especially from higher education, in a more stricter way as compared to its earlier regime. This dark rule of Taliban, as it held sway in 1996 and up to 2001, it had banned all education for women, and women were deprived of not only of education, not only from education, but from employment also. Even now, women who are having degrees in their hands, diplomas in their hands, they are not being permitted to go for any employment. Employment opportunities are restricted for women. Only in menial jobs, in jobs of second grade, women are being permitted in Afghanistan. So Afghan Sarkar, the Taliban administration, as it calls itself, so it is not permitting, the Taliban government is not permitting women to have opportunities equal to men. It is depriving on all fronts. Women are being deprived by Taliban from taking up degrees, from taking up jobs. Even in case they are having degrees in their hands, they are not being permitted to take up the jobs. Taliban regime has applied the same regimen as it was having in its first term. It has banned women from going outside of their homes, traveling without a family male partner, and it is imposing more restrictions upon their entertainment also. All films are banned. They are not permitted to attend any sort of public ceremonies without being accompanied by male members of the family. And all entertainment for women is totally banned. They cannot listen to any music. They cannot attend any parties. They cannot go to any social gatherings. And all is being done in the name of Islam. Now, Taliban says that they are mulling over proposals where Islamic standards would be applied to schools, classes, and only then women will be permitted. But it seems that women will never be permitted. Before this, Taliban has erected partitions in classrooms where male students were separated from female students, and niqabs and hijabs, they were imposed very strictly that girl students would not go to classes without niqabs and hijabs. And despite that, despite all these partitions, niqabs, hijabs, despite everything, they are not permitting, they are not allowing women students to attend schools. There are no schools for girl students even up to 6th standard in many of the provinces of Afghanistan, and the provinces which are having arrangement for classes for girl students even up to 6th standard, they are now complaining of lack of teachers. Many of teachers, they have fled away from Afghanistan as Taliban have taken power in August 2021. So they have fled away and they are not ready to return. There is a crunch. There is a real crunch. It is not that Afghan government is propagating about this. Afghan government is definitely hiding behind this pretext, but this pretext has a real rooting also. Many of the teachers have fled away from Afghanistan and they are not ready to return. So there's a massive crunch of teachers. So teachers are not there. If infrastructure is there, teachers are not there. If teachers are there, then Taliban's injunctions, they are not permitting teachers to attend the schools. Teachers are afraid. Even parents are fearful of sending their daughters to Taliban schools. These Taliban schools are run by Taliban administration now. So there are no schools where free education can be imparted, and the parents are not interested in sending their girls, their daughters, to these schools for another reason. If after taking degree and diplomas, after taking certificates from the school, they cannot go for employment, they cannot use these degrees and diplomas and certificates for any, they cannot put it to any use whatsoever. So what is the fun in taking these degrees and diplomas? Parents are putting it to themselves and to their daughters also. Why are you going to school when your degrees and diplomas, they would be of no use? You would not be admitted to any government employment. In government employment, girls and women are now practically, they are banned from taking up jobs. Only menial jobs, cleaning jobs, and this and that, attendant jobs, they are available for women. Good jobs are not available for women. Jobs of A category, B category, they are not available for women in Afghanistan. So in Afghanistan, we are returning to the same dark regime as it existed in the first term of Taliban. Taliban had given promises to international community. International community was not ready to recognize Taliban administration, and Taliban administration had promised to international community that in exchange of this recognition, we will be giving liberty to women and will be recognizing their rights, right to education, right to employment, etc. But now they have taken a U-turn, and this Afghan government, Afghan Sarkar as they call it, so this is not ready to give impart even a very basic education to girl students. No rights are being recognized, no women rights are being recognized. If women go outside and they go without a veil, without without a niqab and hijab, so they are being whipped publicly in cities, what to say of villages and uh, suburbs, in cities like Kabul, in cities like Kandahar, they are being whipped. So this is the situation, and this situation has once again arisen as Taliban has taken over. It is not that the Western rule in Afghanistan has done a lot for women. We are well aware that as a British parliamentarian has told that our mission in Afghanistan was not to civilize Afghanistan but to loot Afghanistan, to make Afghanistan compensate us for whatever losses were done by Afghan militants to US and UK. So this mission, this Western mission in Afghanistan was never to civilize Afghanistan, and it never civilized it. But yes, some schools were there, some education was there, and now under Taliban regime, that is also gone. The despair has increased, and the education, the employment of women, that has gone down. Even primary education, that is now under aches of Taliban administration. As the Western backed government of Ashraf Ghani had collapsed in the August last year, teachers have already fled away, and therefore there are no teachers and there is no infrastructure in Taliban. Last time when Taliban was there, it had completely banned education and employment both, and returning to power, it has continued the same regimen. It has continued the very same deprivation of women from education and employment both. All opportunities for women are closed, and it is endorsing the very same Quranic regime, which in fact uh, bans, which restricts, which prevents women from entering schools and colleges. Earlier, COVID pandemic was there, therefore schools were closed down. 7 months before, schools had started to open slowly, and younger girls, uh, they were permitted to sit there, but with a partition, with male students and male and female students, even children, they were prevented from meeting each other, from talking to each other, from communicating with each other. And this sort of ban that continues, but Taliban government deems now that this ban in itself is not sufficient. This partition is not sufficient. These injunctions are not sufficient. So they have totally banned girl students from attending classes and going to schools and colleges. International community has made it a condition precedent to recognition of Taliban administration, that if Taliban administration doesn't give rights to women to an education and employment, then there will be no recognition. But now it seems that Taliban regime is not caring for this. It is not caring for international recognition, though the situation inside Afghanistan is very bad. Situation uh, is worsening in Afghanistan. People are not having sufficient food to eat. They are not having clothing. There is absolute poverty in Afghanistan. and Afghanistan government is looking for international economic aid. In Afghanistan, there are lots of people who are suffering from diseases. There are no medicines available, and Afghan government is depending upon international aid. It is desperately seeking that international aid. But despite that, despite this abject poverty and this entire deprivation of Afghan population from international community, Afghan rulers are not ready to take a lesson. They are hell bent upon return of the same regime which was earlier overthrown by intervention of US and NATO. So Talibans are once again imposing a regime that would be hated by working and toiling people in Afghanistan, that would be hated by youth, that would be hated by women, that would be hated by all progressive people all over the world, and they will find themselves in a situation where they would be totally isolated from the world. They would not be able to control Afghanistan, and we can see that Afghanistan, even at this time, it's not only a failed government, but it's a dying administration. It is already dying, and on its deathbed, it is committing worst of the crimes that it had already committed. It is carrying forward them. The crime against women, once Lenin had said that the prosperity, the culture of a society that can be measured only through the prosperity of women, that can be measured only through situation of women in that society. Now, applying that yardstick, if we look at Afghanistan, Afghanistan is one of the worst countries all over the world that is depriving women of their rights, that is not permitting women even to take primary education, that is creating deliberately, intentionally, it is creating all sorts of hurdles on the path of women to take education and to take up employment. What to say of government employment, they are creating hurdles so that women are not able to take up even private employment, and they must be forced to do menial jobs. So that is a very calculated and deliberate policy to push women to a secondary status and to compel women to accept this secondary status through application of violence, through whipping them publicly and pushing all measures that would further isolate women in Afghanistan. Talibans have imposed all sorts of restrictions in their new regime also. International community that had made it a condition precedent for recognition of Taliban administration is looking upon this this new act of Taliban, this condemnable action of Taliban, with all hate it deserves, and with anger, with despair. But inside Afghanistan, international community finds itself in a situation where it can't do anything. The Western attack upon Afghanistan, its occupation in Afghanistan, has not done anything good to Afghanistan. Rather, it has pushed it into more dark ages, and finally, these Western powers, US and NATO, have created the conditions where Taliban has arisen, its power has arisen. So the Western community is primarily responsible in at least for 2 decades. It was in power in Afghanistan for creation of this situation, for creation of the conditions in which Taliban has arisen. It was born and it was nurtured. It has ultimately taken power in Afghanistan. Earlier, Soviet occupation was opposed by US and NATO, and this Taliban, force of Taliban, was created and trained by US and NATO imperialists, and this force was duly nurtured for decades to counter the Soviet invasion. This fascist force was duly created and fed and fueled by Western imperialists. So this is their progeny. This is their creation. And now, when Taliban has taken over Afghanistan and its sections are there, now these Western powers are telling us that they are against Taliban. They are countering Taliban. In fact, they are not countering Taliban. They have given birth to Taliban. They have, in fact, nurtured and they have brought up Taliban, and they have ultimately handed over the power to this dark force in Afghanistan. So this situation which exists in Afghanistan, this is not dropped from the sky. This is creation of these US and NATO imperialists. And its victims are young people, especially women, working and toiling masses are victim of this situation. People at present are fearful of sending their daughters outside. They have fear of Taliban. They have fear that their daughters would be beaten up, they would be manhandled by Taliban militants publicly on the roads. So there is a situation in Afghanistan where women are its worst victims. Those who already have degrees and diplomas, they are sitting at their home and they have nothing to do because they cannot attend any employment, they cannot take up any employment because of Taliban injunctions. Taliban administration is a failed administration, it's a dying administration, it's an administration for which the ground was prepared by US and NATO. They have organized Taliban, and they are primarily responsible for the situation that exists in Afghanistan today. Insofar as Soviet intervention is concerned in Afghanistan, in fact, that was not a revolutionary intervention. We know that the Soviet Revolution, the October Revolution, was reversed inside Soviet Union long back in history. The counter-revolution under Stalin and Stalinists had taken over in Soviet Union, and it was this counter-revolution that had in fact intervened in Afghanistan, and that was countered by Afghan people, by toiling masses of Afghanistan. And it was this counter-revolution that was ultimately overthrown in Afghanistan. It was substituted by an occupation of US and NATO later on, after being first substituted by the fascist forces in Afghanistan. So there is a long chain of agony and pain for Afghan people, for working and toiling masses in Afghanistan, and that it seems that it knows no end. It is not going to come to an end. It is going on and on. So far as US and NATO imperialist powers are concerned, they have created these conditions in not only in Afghanistan, but in many parts of the world. And more recently, Ukraine has fallen victim to their designs. In Ukraine also, they are supporting this sort of dark forces of Azov battalions under Zelensky. The US and NATO, though they trumpet in the name of democracy, they trumpet in the name of freedom and liberty, but they support the most dictatorial regimes. They support the dark fascist movements all over the globe, and they are guilty of it. The situation that exists in Afghanistan, that is attributable solely to the exploitative expeditions of US and NATO, their military expeditions in Afghanistan and all over the world. Why to segregate Afghanistan? All over the world, they have made this war permanent. Their plunder of human resources, of natural resources, that has subjected one country after another to this permanent war. They have a motive behind it, and that motive is the motive of loot, the motive of plunder, and with this motive they cannot civilize the world. It is absolutely untrue, this is false, that these forces of US and NATO, they are going to backward periphery of the world with any positive motive, with any progressive motive. Rather, their whole purpose is to loot this periphery. And now they are admitting it openly. Politicians in US and NATO countries, they are openly admitting that they are not going there for any noble mission. Rather, their mission is to compensate themselves from what they call the assault of the backward periphery. So their mission in itself is malicious, that is for loot and plunder of resources from these countries, and they cannot give anything, they cannot deliver anything in these countries for working and toiling people, for common people. They would only loot these territories, they would only subject them to exploitation and nothing else. So given this, we find how these dark forces of Taliban are imposing this sort of black regime and making the weakest sections like women their victim. Hijab is being imposed. Once again, burqa is being imposed. This is what is being done by these black forces in Afghanistan. And on the other hand, in countries like India, they are imposing same regimen in the name of removing hijab and burqa. In India recently, there was huge controversy centered upon hijab, where the saffron forces, the saffron fascists, they had banned hijab in schools of Karnataka through a government order, and the same sort of policing regarding the attire of women that was taken up, that was imposed upon girl students in Karnataka. And we can see that this is only flip side of Taliban regime. Afghan Talibans are asking women to wear hijab. Indian Talibans are asking women to remove hijab. But these fascist dictates, they are same in both countries. One is imposing the removal. So we find in the times of crisis of capitalism all over the world, we find these right-wing tendencies, these fascist and semi-fascist tendencies gaining ground once again after they were sidelined and they were marginalized in the last century. After Second World War, we see the return of same regime, not only in Afghanistan, but all over the world. These right-wing and fascist and semi-fascist tendencies, they are being strengthened. They are being reinforced by the same dark forces. And the dark force, the chief dark force, capitalism itself. Capitalism is in crisis, is giving rise to this fungus of fascism. And it is spreading all over the body of the globe. All over the body of capitalism, a global capitalism. So capitalism is marred into this cobweb of fascism and wars. Fascism inside the frontiers of countries and wars outside these frontiers. And may it be the Afghan Sarkar, the Afghan government, the Afghan administration, Taliban administration, or the administration in US or the government in India, these right-wing tendencies are finding favor. They are gaining ground everywhere. Everywhere we see the rise of these right-wing tendencies, the tendencies of domination, the tendencies of sort of right-wing assertions, fascism in various forms. In Afghanistan, it is green, Taliban. In India, it is saffron, Hindu. But ultimately, in its essence, it is fascism. So these fascist tendencies in the times of crisis, they are coming to rescue of capitalism. They are coming to rescue of the capitalist world. They have to be defeated. If liberty is to be secured, if liberation is to be secured, not only of women, yes, primarily liberation of women is on agenda, but it is the question of liberation of the mankind. Mankind from the assault, from the aches of this decadent capitalism. Each passing day, capitalism is decaying more and more, and this decadent capitalism is ultimately resulting in the rise of and strengthening of these right-wing tendencies that threaten the mankind of abduction of all liberties, of all sort of imposition of all sort of deprivation, of pushing our world into the dark ages of medievalism. So these tendencies have to be fought. And the very ground from where these tendencies are emerging, where these tendencies are rooted, the ground of capitalism, imperialism, that has to be fought against. That has to be overturned. This is the challenge before our generation, the youth, the workers, the toilers, and especially women. If we fail to overturn capitalism in time, we are already late by more than a century. If we become more late, and if we fail to overturn it, it would continue to decay, and this fungus of fascism, it would eschew the healthy body of our society. It would continue to eschew. So, comrades and dear friends, we must take up this challenge. We must challenge capitalism. We must struggle against it. And we must organize to overturn it, to establish a socialist society, to establish the power of workers and toilers. We must fight against this world regime of capital. With this, I thank you for being with us, and we will continue the sort of talks in future, and would continue to struggle for the aim of establishment of socialist society and workers' power. Thank you very much, dear friends. Thank you.